What's been on my mind to talk about with you this afternoon is embodied practice. Embodied practice. The subtlety and intimacy of this embodied practice, and say some words about this. And you know, it's even this phrase embodied practice is, I'm almost sorry that I even have to use that word, embodied. It's kind of a thing now. There's embodied practices and non-embodied practices. Oh, this is an embodied practice. This is an embodied practice. And I think a lot of times we might even think that Zen, being so still in our bodies and very focused on an internal experience, sometimes maybe not considered an embodied practice. I know it's not considered an embodied practice by some people. I hope that all of you who do it understand that it's completely an embodied practice, and always has been. And it strikes me that if we were to use that term, you know, a few hundred years ago with the Zen practitioners these days, is Zen an embodied practice? You know, what are you talking about? Of course it's an embodied practice. It's entirely an embodied practice, okay? And practicing with our bodies. So it's a little bit of just a skillful means to even use that term based on how we understand this practice. It's always an embodied practice. This body is the vehicle of our practice. It's the landscape of our practice, the territory of our practice. Okay. So most of us did weeding for for our work practice. Yeah, I always hated weeding. as a young person, we would do weeding. My parents wanted us to maintain some semblance of order and decorum in our household, our lawn and gardens. And it's not like we had elaborate gardens, but my parents did their best to kind of keep it at least under control. And we were often, me and my three siblings, were often enlisted in helping with the garden. And maybe it's natural to resist that as a teen or a preteen, because weeding can be boring and uncomfortable on the body. And sure enough, it was for me, so I always hated it. Just waiting to get away and go out and play soccer, or do something fun. And I kind of brought that resistance in when I started practicing Zen and then started doing work practice. And then sure enough, weeding is oftentimes what's happening for Samui practice. So I ended up doing a lot. And I came to, I actually would say I came to love weeding. Not to say I don't still have a resistance to it. I need to get over that. But once I get into it, it's so immersive. And the thing that I want to bring out about it here is just how subtly physical it is. You know, we're really engaged in a really intimate communion with the weed, and we can feel, you know, just with that little bit of a tug, kind of how entrenched that weed is and how deep it goes, and then we start to, you know, move the dirt around it, pull and tug, and we're trying to pull without snapping it off and leaving the root in, but we've got to do it enough to get the whole root to come out. This is such a rich, intimate process. One of you shared with me that you engaged in this, you know, starting off, it was all about the speed, just jumping in and, oh, I gotta get this done. I'm gonna really be productive here. And powering through, and then looked over to somebody who was a more seasoned practitioner and noticed how slowly they were going, and also how beautiful the land was, where it had been really covered deeply. So even though it was less ground that had been covered, it had been done really deeply. He has a great book called The Path of Aliveness that I've recommended to several of you. And he talks about the Four Noble Truths as enactments. Enactments. And I like this, and I'm gonna develop this a little bit in my own way. I'm gonna use the word embodiment. Enactment, for me, maybe have some connotations that I don't want to bring out, but I want to bring out embodiment. So the first noble truth being, we experience life as dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but also as insufficiency or inadequacy, or as a gap between something and something. Let's say a gap between my experience in this moment and how I would like my experience in this moment to be. That's the gap. Yeah? Okay, so that's great. Those words are great and helpful to hear that. But what does that feel like? That's Zen practice. Let's explore how that feels like. So can we tune in? I'll invite you to do this. Close your eyes. And tune in to where there might be something missing in this moment. A sense of not okayness. What does it feel like? Okay, right there is the ground of our practice. Right there. Can we actually feel in the moment a sense of inadequacy, a feeling of something not quite being right? So our initial practice of meditation, of zazen, requires us to stabilize our attention. Okay? So we use a breath practice in order to stabilize the attention, because naturally we have a lot of distractions. You know, the activity of our mind is the surface thing that's keeping us from paying close attention to ourselves. Like I said earlier today, while we were sitting, you know, everything is about where we apply our attention, and then the depth and quality of attention. And the deeper the quality of attention, the more livingness of our internal world arises, that is born from, that is nurtured from that loving attention. Okay, so we have to be able to just bring this focus and quality, including emotional quality of attention, a warm attention, to our internal experience in order to do this practice at all. Okay, that's the beginning of doing this practice. So breath practice is what enables us to do that, to get below the surface level distraction, to be able to fix our attention where we want it to be, so that the internal experience arises and unfolds, and we can stay with it. As long as the mind, the attention, including all of the emotional investment, is moving around from thing to thing, or following a train of rumination or anxious thoughts, we're not able to do, we're not able to do the deep work that Zen practice is. Okay. So we develop this ability to stay with, and now what are we staying with? Well, we're staying with, in Zen, we're staying with our koan, or staying with the shikantaza practice, single-pointed attention, where the single point is the whole universe. Okay. I'm going to move to koan practice, because I'm going to talk about these noble truths, or whatever these edgy experiences are within your experience. Those are koans, okay? It's not just formal koans, it's these as your koans. So the koan of the first noble truth. What does insufficiency feel like right now in my body? we go into that. Okay, and we explore it in the same way that our fingers delve into the root of the weeds. The second noble truth is that this sense comes from what the Buddha called attachment. Attachment takes three forms: craving, aversion, and ignorance. Okay, so a pulling towards, a pushing away, and then a kind of a blocking the view, you could say. Okay, let's take each one of these separately. Okay, can we feel that craving? Can we feel that pull? There's something I'm not feeling right now that I want to feel. Oftentimes, the craving and aversion are two sides of the same sensation, you could say. I'm feeling tired and I want to feel rested. I'm feeling activated and I want to feel calm. I'm feeling scared and I want to feel safe. Okay? I want everyone to go deeper than the words I'm using into the feelings. What does activation feel like? What does calmness feel like? What does safety feel like? What does fear feel like? Our practice requires us, asks us, invites us to be intimate with all of these things. So in our zazen, we're allowing all of those to unfold within our awareness, within our bodies, yes, within our embodied awareness. Okay, what's going on? You know, it's not all what's going on. We can focus too much on what's going on with our minds, with our thinking minds in this meditation. Then we think, oh, I'm thinking too much, I have to clear my mind. Okay? No. All you're doing is feeding your thinking mind when you do that. Okay? You don't need a clear mind. What you need to do is to be able to fix your attention in this way. Now, while you're doing that, actually, what you'll see is that all of that mental activity, oftentimes, is kind of a form of aversion. It's a form of bypass. Okay? So what is the feeling that is generating, sourcing, bubbling up into that thinking activity that's happening? We can get in touch with this. I remember Shishin Roshi shared with me one time how the point he got in his practice, and it sounded like it was 10 or 15 years into his practice. It was a seasoned practice. Where he could feel thoughts start to bubble up in his body before they appeared in his mind as word or image. Yeah, feel that, and I see some of you nodding, and so you can have this. You have had this experience too. We can feel that there's something cooking almost in the body, and then oh, okay, and it can come out in a thought, a phrase, a word, an image, a sentence. Okay. So the practice is to get to what's going on in the body underneath those thoughts. And here I want to bring in Dogen and the Genjo koan. I was going to do it at the end, but the punchline to the talk, but I feel like it's important to bring it in now. So in the Genjo koan, Dogen says, flowers die although we love them, and weeds grow although we dislike them. Yeah. Okay. So the important point here is that our practice isn't about uprooting all the weeds. It isn't about stopping thinking. or uprooting all the weeds. And those weeds can be many manifestations of, well, it could be anything we dislike, actually. Yeah, okay. But the practice isn't to uproot all the weeds. It's actually be fully present, accepting, and even loving of all phenomena, regardless of our preferences. And to experience the world not from the self-centered view that is so oftentimes colored by and conditioned by our preferences, but to really accept them all. So I want to bring that in now because just to say that this intimacy with these sources of attachment, to eradicate them. Kill them. Is to become intimate with them. Intimate participation with this life and the arising. Okay, when we're not really intimate with them, we very quickly become, distant from them in a way. I mean, in a way you could say we kind of disown them. They become separate from us, and then they become the project that we need to fix. These manifestations within our body minds. Okay. So what does it feel like? What does the lack feel like? What does craving feel like? Become intimate with what you are craving. You crave something different from me. Yeah, actually. You have found worth and goodness and okayness, even pleasure, in ways that are unique to you. And I found those things in ways that are unique to me. Now, there's some common things that are generally pleasurable and generally provide safety. Right? But we have our own ways of finding those things. So there's very specific and intimate, unique to you, feelings. And I shouldn't say the feelings are the same, right? We all can connect with pleasure and safety and connection and those good things, as well as discomfort and pain in those. But the things that bring us that are not always the same. So become intimate with yourself, with your own self. What are the things that bring you those feelings? And most importantly, what are the things you're doing to pull the good stuff towards you and push the bad stuff away from you? That's our practice. To investigate what's going on with your body, mind in that area. I think I might have mentioned this before, and I think it was a little controversial, so I haven't talked about it since. But I think I can bring it in here in this group. I somewhat ridiculously decided to get myself addicted to cigarettes when I was 27 years old. I never smoked, as a teenager or my early 20s. I was drinking more than I wanted to in my mid-20s. And I thought that getting addicted to cigarette would maybe I would drink less. I know, completely ridiculous. But also I was curious, and I still am. I'm just curious about, well, what would that be like? What would that be like? Exploratory. I'm still like that. I'm exploratory about that. So I experimented with a lot of drugs just because I was curious. What's this going to be like? So this was kind of in that vein. And I did. I like chain smoked while on a cross country trip with my brother. You know, it was horrible. You know, it's like just horrible. But it worked. You know, I kind of did develop a habit, and it didn't get that bad. Well, it got bad. And the worst it got was about 7 cigarettes a day, which is pretty bad. You know, I mean, you don't want to keep that going. And then I was like, this is terrible. I gotta stop. I'm playing soccer, you know, while I'm doing this, so it's like just awful. And I wised up, and and we got to cut down. Now, nicotine's highly addictive, as you all know, and so I had a task ahead of me, and I decided. I actually had a very disciplined process of I smoked 7 a day for 1 week, and I went down to 6 a day, then 5 a day, and 4 a day, and in 7 weeks I was off, and it worked. So I'm pretty disciplined in that way. But the most important thing for me to enable to do this was to feel the craving. Feel the craving. The crudiness, the clenching in the belly, that wanted that. That is, to me, I think it's the only way, actually, to release yourself from the attachment of craving, is to actually feel it all the way through and be willing to do that and to be able to do that. Is this I see people nodding. Does this resonate? Yeah, maybe some of you have gone through something very similar. So that's exactly how it is with our attachments. You know, we got a nice addiction gives us a magnified version of the craving form of attachment, and it's a very powerful. But that's the mechanism that's going on here, and the mechanism of releasing ourselves from our attachment is we have to be able to feel the discomfort of that craving without having it satisfied. Okay, and in that comes a kind of liberation. Okay. Ignorance. What does ignorance feel like? This is interesting. And actually, I'll go ahead and invite you to close your eyes and see if you can touch into and perhaps even name what this ignorance might feel like. So anybody have anything? Yeah.
Confusion.
Confusion? Or what does confusion feel like?
Like wandering around in your mind being lost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Feeling lostness.
Lostness,
Okay.
dizziness.
Dizziness, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, dizziness. Anyone else? Yeah?
Certainty.
Certainty? Certainty. Certainty. So what does certainty feel like?
Heat.
Heat?
Yeah.
Where in your body is the heat?
Here.
Heat in the belly.
And here.
Okay, heat. Okay, so like some kind of an intensity. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Ollie.
Fog. Like a weighted blanket.
Yeah.
That it's like it's on my thoughts, but it has a very tactile kind of wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that one too. Yeah. Anyone else?
Dullness.
Dullness.
Lack of vividness.
Lack of
kind
vividness.
Sense of low resolution.
Okay. Yeah, there's a feeling in the body when we're clear, and then there's a feeling in the body, some of you have touched on, when it's not clear and it's dull. Okay. Anyone else? One more? Yeah?
And underwater.
Underwater. Okay. Yeah, kind of murky and okay. Yeah, I've got a sense also of kind of a contraction. There's something like a smallness. There's a smallness, and I'm counteracting a little bit with what I understand to be release from ignorance, which isn't knowledge, because that's the certainty that you're talking about, which is really ignorance, more aligned with ignorance. But it's more of a knowingness that is a real, truly grounded, embodied knowingness. Okay, more of a gnosis than a knowledge. And that has an open feeling to it, and a large, expansive kind of feeling to it. Whereas ignorance, I have a closed and contracted feeling to it. Okay, so this is subtle, okay? And the Buddha even said ignorance is the most difficult of the three forms of attachment, the three poisons to work with. Because the other ones do have these emotional charge quality to them, which we're all familiar with. But ignorance, it's subtle. It's actually very subtle. In fact, you could even say it's so subtle that most of it, we don't even have access to it. And that's why ignorance is the toughest, because in a way we don't even know. We may not know it because we don't feel it. We don't feel it. And then we convince ourselves we do know, so there we go. Ignorant of our own ignorance. And then, ooh. How do you work with it? This is how you work with it. This is how you work with these koans of our everyday life. Okay, to feel into these feelings. Okay, and then to explore them with the body. Okay, and then to see what unfolds, to see what happens, to see what opens up from those. Okay. So I'm not going to go to the third and the fourth noble truths. I'm going to leave that for another time or for your own investigation. But this was the embodied practice of the first two noble truths as koans, which is right in line with the reading that we were doing in Samui today. But with this important exception, that it isn't about pulling all the weeds out. Okay, I really want to do that. Now, there's an element of cleaning up and clarifying the mind, so that you can have that quality of presence that I talked about at the beginning. I mean, if it's all weeds and all jungle, and you're not, and that's keeping you from fixing your attention where you want it to be, then we need to find a way for you to be able to do that. And a great way to be able to do that is to open up the space and to do some weeding. Okay? We're not exploring every single thought that arises, but to really develop this capacity and this openness. Okay, and then we can go in. We can go into it. There's this Zen tale. I'm sure everybody's probably heard it, but the young monk is tasked with cleaning and beautifying the rock garden, right? And he does this amazing job, and it's picture perfect. Like there's a cherry blossom tree off to the side, and he's picked up all of the leaves and got all of the rocks beautiful, and maybe done the raking, so all the lines, right? And he goes to the master, and he's like, what do you think? Good, huh? The master goes, oh, no. What did I miss? And the master walks up to the tree and shakes it. Perfect. Okay, so that's it. Flowers die, although we love them. Weeds grow, although we dislike them. The petals drop. And then that kind of beautiful mess becomes the territory, the material of our practice. Yeah, so let's keep returning to this intimate examination, embodied study of yourself. Okay, this isn't just about clearing your mind and becoming calm. Please, I hope we're all beyond that. Okay, that's the beginning stages of this practice. The richness, the beauty, the joy, and the challenge, because it's not easy to do this, comes in this feeling into these subtle edges that we have. And really allowing whatever arises to arise. I did want to share this. I find myself recently with just several surges of just really embarrassing memories. I'm going to bed and I've just got all this stuff, and remembering these things I did in the past. The cigarette wasn't one of them. I was kind of proud of that. But really stuff that I still, I still judge myself for. It's a lot of messiness. And I notice myself judging myself, and I notice myself doing that, and I try to bring some compassion. But I don't think I'm ever gonna stop doing that. Got karmic seeds, from my life and my past that are gonna keep coming up. We'll have, moments of judgment and self-criticism and putting myself down and insecurity and lack of confidence. And I do, it's humbling, but it's also very, I'm okay with it. Yeah, very okay with it. Yeah, to welcome that as just an ordinary human life, and to welcome that in is there's a joy and a beauty there. So I share that with you vulnerably, and in the hopes that you will not judge yourselves at all. The point of this practice is not to get to a place where you no longer have muddy, embarrassed, self-critical thoughts like that. Yeah, they are going to continue to come up. But you will, if you really intimately engage with them and explore them and accept them, it takes on a completely different character. You really open up to all of that being part of, something much bigger than your limited sense of yourself. So please don't try to be like a perfectly manicured garden. Okay, so we keep going. You enjoy your practice for the rest of the session.